You know when we find those isekai universes where the character enters a little game and starts forming a huge arena and gaining bizarre abilities? That's exactly why I'm in love with this story, and we'll keep following it. We are taken into an isekai world inside a little game, but there's nothing cliché about a super overpowered protagonist. That's because our hero of the story was the greatest support in the world, meaning he's gonna enter his favorite game to support all the heroes. And if you like this kind of theme, don't forget to leave a like to strengthen our channel. Don't forget to comment what you thought about this work. And let's get to the video. The Dragon Slayers Academy. In this game, people team up to solve problems of an academy, and after graduating start fighting monsters around the world. And in this game, our protagonist is the best support in the world, so much that he received this title for being the best of them all. In one of the raids against a portal where there were many giant monsters, huge wolves with extremely sharp claws, the protagonist Kim, called Saint, used his dominant aura, and with that managed to open space for the others to blast the monsters. Everyone in this group was rank S. One of them was the Black Knight, who was tearing a serpent in half with his gigantic sword and dark magic. Our boy loved this game and playing with his companions. And finally, they found the true stone. That stone could raise a vampire to rank S, and they called for Carmilla. In this game, heroes could evolve up to rank S, and he gave her the stone. The heroine began to absorb the stone directly into her chest, and Carmilla transformed into the vampire queen of rank S. This was the 1000th hero that our protagonist managed to raise to rank S, and now it was time to take a nap and get back to work the next day. He kept thinking about what kind of hero he could raise to the maximum level next time. After all, he had already raised more than 1000. However, at that moment the system notified him and his eyes shone when he saw the mission. Since he had achieved 1000 rank S heroes, he got a secret and special mission, one to prevent the destruction of the world. The difficulty was rank X, the highest of all. In rank X were the greatest rewards of the heroes of this game universe. It seemed to be exclusive content for those who managed to raise 1000 rank S heroes. Clearly our boy clicked to accept that mission. But when he blinked, he was in a completely different place in the middle of a forest. That place looked exactly like the tutorial forest of his game. He got scared because right in front of him appeared the mission window with his name being Kim Hole. The mission he accepted meant he had reincarnated in this game world, and he also gained some abilities he didn't have in the past. Little by little, he began to get used to this system window around him. A mission appeared saying he needed to survive the tutorial, and he remembered it well because it was super easy. He just needed to run from weak monsters, or at least that's what he thought until he looked up to the skies. Up there, two huge dragons were battling against each other. Kim started running into the forest. It seems that difficulty level X meant exactly that. The dragons were using extremely powerful elemental magics, and the protagonist imagined he could use the system's copy ability. To copy, he needed to witness the exact moment the abilities activated besides identifying the status, skill, and name of the target. At the moment of the great explosion of that magic, all that was very easy for the protagonist, because he knew every corner of that game like the back of his hand. Then he obtained the S-rank elemental resistance ability. Honestly, he couldn't believe he had copied a skill of that level so easily, but because of that, he resisted the explosion of flames around him. Right after, he noticed that the wind was being pulled in another direction. It was the red dragon sucking all the oxygen from the area into its mouth, while the electric dragon on the other side drew all the electricity from the skies. Kim knew that was the most powerful attack of the dragons, each one's breath attack. And even with the resistance he had just gained, at that distance he would probably be hit and obliterated. The two dragons activated their breath abilities against each other. A huge explosion appeared behind the protagonist, but as all good things must go on, the tutorial ended. Because of that, he gained the chance to enter the Dragon Slayers Academy. That means for a second his life was saved and he stopped at a train station. We were taken inside the train where a boy asked if he could sit there. At that exact moment, the protagonist was teleported into that place and asked if he could sit with them. The girl woke up all drooling and with marks on her face. The protagonist quickly asked to sit and without hesitation just settled beside her. Her name was Ayazo. The other boy holding a sword was Gori. He soon apologized, saying the train wasn't departing so fast because during the tutorial he had to distract two dragons. The protagonist knew that well since he went through the same situation. Then the train started leaving the station and they talked for quite a while during the ride. Kim managed to recognize several faces, but many were unfamiliar. This world of the Dragon Academy was completely different from his game. Still, some faces looked very familiar. She had a special eye able to turn everything she saw into data. For example, when she looked at Gori, she could turn his data into something measurable. But with Kim it was completely different. All his stats were locked for her. Then she realized he was really special. In a way, she got embarrassed for staring at him for so long, so she just picked up her suitcase, remembering her mother's words. Inside it there were some little cookies. That was because her mother had told her that when she liked someone she should give the cookies as a gift too. Then the protagonist just accepted them. After all, they were free sweets, right? And it seemed like she really loved cookies, since her backpack was full of them. The protagonist asked if Gori was really a swordsman. He answered yes, that sword was a sacred relic from his martial sect, but since he wasn't yet qualified to break the seal, he carried another silver sword. The protagonist asked if that sword was really reliable, but at that moment the door opened, and a guy started laughing a lot, asking if he could stay with them for a while. Honestly, no one cared if he stayed or not. His name was Shin, and he was part of the service group, able to find anything for the right price. Basically, he came to offer his services to our protagonist. The boy seemed quite anxious, to the point of looking outside, waiting for the academy to arrive as soon as possible. But then the door began to open once again, and Shin got scared seeing that patrol because they were precisely looking for him. It seemed to be the discipline committee, searching for people making trouble inside the train. That was the first-year group responsible for disciplining the other students. Their leader pointed at Shin, ordering him to return what he had taken. Then she electrocuted him without hesitation. She was an electric-type mage. The protagonist just looked at his cookie, apologized, and threw it on the floor in the train corridor. The girl put on a glove and said that Shin needed to return the money he took from the other students. Then she snapped her fingers, focusing even more electricity around her, and summoned the electric hummingbird. A bird flew straight toward Shin, who could only wait for the direct hit to his chest. But suddenly the protagonist's hand came out of the cabin and grabbed the electric hummingbird with his bare hands. He squeezed that magic so hard it ended up self-destructing. The leader of the committee asked if he had some accomplice hiding there, but stepping out of the cabin, the protagonist said he wasn't an accomplice of any kind, just pointed to the ground and said his cookie had fallen there. She was completely shocked to see that guy holding her magic just because of a cookie. The protagonist did it to copy the electric hummingbird skill. Of course, that cookie on the floor ended up causing a bigger conflict. One of the committee guys told him to apologize, or else he'd burn him completely. But at that moment, Gory warned everyone to be careful, because his sword was very sharp and the atmosphere got tense among the group. The leader then told everyone to calm down, saying she'd give him a little discount coupon to buy a new cookie. Then she glared at Shin again, while her hands crackled with electricity. The protagonist also electrified his hand, thanking her for the earlier skill. But the leader only said that Shin had stolen the wig of the station clerk and that this prank had gone too far. The group, after retrieving the item, simply left. Gory was thrilled to see the council. After all, they were the Academy's elite, especially Shin. She was the heir of the Great Lord Topaz, the greatest electric mage in the world. Besides that, there were several famous people there, descendants of great world leaders and magic tower masters. Shin just thanked them for their involvement and said goodbye. The protagonist honestly wasn't upset about the cookie. He just wanted to see that rare electric-type magic. It was also Gory's first time seeing a spell of that level. It was so fast he couldn't even follow it with his eyes. The electric hummingbird served to immobilize and paralyze those it hit. The protagonist said everything was fine, but the coolest part was that he could freeze a mimic bird. Then he showed the complete spell how it could really be used. That meant the magic could fly freely and even hit Shin, but its control was so weak that he could capture it himself. That was because he had much more combat experience than that girl. Now he was happy to have met someone so special like that in front of him. Our hero was amazed by Shin, because that magic was on a very high level to be controlled. Because of his generosity and teachings, Gory really liked the protagonist, to the point of offering his sword to help him in future missions. And Shin, wasting no time, asked to borrow a coin from the protagonist. Then they ran to another nearby wagon and found a betting machine. Yeah, seems like the little tiger game exists in this world too. The protagonist put the coin into that little game and commented that the device actually wasn't broken. With just one spin, he managed to reach the maximum score. Then he pulled the lever to claim the prize. And well, the prize was actually a bottle of water. Not quite what he was expecting. In fact, playing on that machine wasn't forbidden, but the items it gave were. So he just said he'd stand guard so his friend could play too. But at that moment, someone from the council appeared. It was Salmon. She quickly warned that playing with Casaniques was illegal at school, and that students breaking the rules would get negative credits. Gory simply said he'd take full responsibility, but then drew his sword, saying he'd heard a lot about her and wanted a duel. As a martial arts practitioner, the girl just jumped forward with her blade in hand. Gory had to defend the first strike that came his way, and the moment he tried to counterattack, Salmon vanished from sight. She leaped away while channeling mana into her weapon. When she landed again, she jumped with force and fury toward Gory, striking a heavy blow against his sword. Kim raised his hand and used mana amplification. With that, he managed to enhance the swordsman's power core, raising him to rank C. That would last only 1 minute, but it was enough for him to fight evenly against Salmon. And it also gave enough time for the protagonist to play a little more with that machine. After winning 3 bottles of water, he pulled the lever once again. He knew that machine had a pity system. After a few tries, it always gave a big prize. On the 4th try, he got a can of water too. That would be his last play. Then, at the moment he inserted the coin, the machine started beeping for the maximum prize. He won the black ice crystal, an item so dangerous it could freeze him completely if not handled properly. That was when Salmon won the duel. She charged toward the protagonist, but he just stared at her back, saying it wasn't the right moment. Meanwhile, Gory's blade went against her, but his sword was completely destroyed. When they turned around, the protagonist was eating the black ice crystal. Salmon shouted that he could be eliminated for that. The system notified that he had gained the frozen status, and indeed his throat started hurting a lot for drinking something so dangerous. The system showed he was receiving the freezing status, but at the same time that same status was being removed quickly. It happened so many times that out of nowhere he was fine. Back in the cabin, he just said that it was an elixir that amplified his mana. In fact, the black ice crystal was an item that could eliminate beginner players, but since he had the S-rank elemental resistance ability he got in the tutorial, the statuses were received, amplified, and removed at the same time. It was hard for Salmon to believe that explanation made any sense. In the end, Gory was just happy for helping his friend in that mission, and the protagonist joked saying he owed him some protagonist coins. He woke up once again after being out for so long, and they were almost arriving at the academy. It was close now. That island was founded by the first Dragon Slayer hero. He conquered every dungeon in the world, and in the end created a city and built an academy with his name. And that's how the Dragon Hunters Academy was born. On the first day for the freshmen, everyone was excited. Many strange things happened in that academy, and the protagonist's little train was heading toward the reception, until Shin approached Kim and asked for a moment of his attention. Then he took him to the student committee, and Kim was taken for interrogation in the Room of Truth. All his answers were true. He wasn't lying about anything at all. That was Serum, the head of the committee, who said that for disobeying the council's orders, he could be disciplined. But since it was his first violation, he would release Kim, and warned he didn't want to see him there again. He also told Shin, who was in the corner of the room, that he didn't like that interrogation at all. Surely that boy was very suspicious for having found an item. After all, it made no sense that he drank the entire black ice crystal. But Shin insisted they use the item and validate the protagonist's abilities. He asked what they would do if nothing was revealed, since using an item of that level on a first-year student was very risky, and told her not to miss the entrance ceremony. After all, it was her year. That way we followed to the entrance ceremony. The protagonist completed tutorial mission number 3 and earned some coupons to get an E-rank item. Up front, the people responsible for the academy were arriving. That man was the hero of the academy, the greatest dragon hunter in the world. The title of hero was given to the highest rank S, the one with the greatest individual abilities. He was one of the heroes available in the game the protagonist used to play, and now he was congratulating the new students entering the academy. The goal for everyone there was to prepare for the imminent war against the dragons. The title of Dragon Hunter was something extremely serious, and those who didn't have the skills to become hunters should leave the academy right then. After all, they could end up losing their lives in the great battle against the dragons. After so much time giving a speech, the secretary just kicked him off the stage, and it seemed like the students were tired of hearing so much talk. The secretary announced it was forbidden to enter the academy with items listed on a certain list, and those who did would be expelled quickly. Her expression looked truly serious. Not that Kim was paying attention. Actually, he was trying to wake Yo, and both were surprised when a guy arrived, because Shin showed up once again with a tiger scratch on his face. He was excited after all. The next day would be their first class. That night, in the boys' dormitory, the protagonist went to his room, but he wasn't sleepy anymore. So he organized his clothes in the closet, and that was the moment to channel his core. All the mana in the environment started concentrating in the core of his body. To consume mana and use magic, one needed to have a core. Since he had absorbed the black ice crystal, the process of creating his core would be much easier. On the other side, there was Gory, meditating too. He was recovering from the battle against Salmon. If not for his friend's help, he would have easily lost. He mentally told his master that he had found someone very special in that academy right away, and wondered if he could really help him with his sealed blade. Actually, he could be his first friend, so he didn't want to rush things. He would do his best with his own strength and try to keep up with him. That way, the next day, in the first class, he was once again yawning with sleep. Didn't even look like he had slept the whole night, huh? He was wondering where the darn teacher was. The girls were whispering some things, until they were surprised to see who was entering the room, because that would be their teacher. His name was Doc, and he asked if the students knew him. One of them ended up calling him a villain hunter. Kim remembered him. In this universe, there are humans who end up surpassing their own limits and becoming evil, and Doc was exactly a vigilante who hunted those criminals, known as the Human of Executions. The teacher announced he was on the side of the law and that he was a professional, scaring everyone by saying he hoped none of them would become villains to the point of needing to be hunted by him. Then he started writing on the board the schedule they would have for the year. The grades would be divided between exams and attitude. If their attitude reached 0%, they could lose points in other subjects. But the most important grade, for sure, was the practical exams and the PvP duels against other students. In other words, all those grades would add up, and that way they could pass the year. And since no one had any questions, they would go straight to the combat arena. It was a huge arena, with several other sub-arenas inside it. That place served to help students improve their individual abilities. The duel time limit was 5 minutes. If they lost or tied, they wouldn't lose any points. The system notified the protagonist that he needed to get at least an average or high grade in this duel exam. The arena was perfect for him to observe other students' abilities, even the level X ones, and also copy their techniques. Minutes later, he was thrown into the duel arena. His opponent was a girl from the Ruby Tower, meaning she could also use destructive and fire magic. She had never heard of any Kim before, but wanted to build a reputation. Just by the staff he carried, it was clear he looked pathetic. Surely he wasn't from a renowned tower capable of using advanced spells. As the countdown began, she started channeling her fire magic and used the combustion skill exploding everything in front of her. People around started praising her, saying she really was from the Ruby Tower with such powerful magic, but she was surprised when she looked at the big screen and saw the protagonist's vitality still at 100%. He began walking through the arena complimenting the girl, but that attack had been completely ineffective. The girl was frightened to see that. Maybe that boy had used a magic dispel. In that case, she would increase the intensity, channeling a new magic circle in her other hand. She knew he couldn't block that using dispel, so she intercepted his entire path with magic circles on the ground and flames around. But as she looked closer, she noticed something strange. Kim remained still, calm, chill, completely unbothered. She got irritated because that could only mean he was too confident. Then she yelled, asking if he could block the next spell, and channeled the fire pillar. A huge pillar of flames rose from the ground to the skies. The whole audience stared at it, filled with fear and awe. The girl looked again to the middle of all that dust and soot, but nothing had happened to Kim. He was completely fine. He used his staff to cast Electric Flower's Kiss, a spell he had copied from Shun. The girl barely managed to dodge that fast bird, but it came back and hit her directly in the back. With that, the paralysis effect was applied and she fell to her knees. Kim asked them to stop for now and said she should save the secret cards of her strongest spells for other moments. After all, they still had many matches throughout the day. It was unbelievable that the protagonist had won even after so many powerful attacks. The murmurs only grew louder. The protagonist needed to be careful. But for the next challenge, he was called again for a duel, and it seemed Shin was the one who called him. Everyone was shocked by that. Then she appeared in the arena, complimenting that the boy's face looked really good. She wanted to test something, that's why she had called him to duel. But Kim just raised his hand, saying he was withdrawing from the fight, and Doc asked why he was doing that. He simply said he wasn't feeling well. After all, he had just fought against a mage from the Ruby Tower. It was all fine, but if he withdrew now, he knew he would lose some points. Shin began to get angry and called the protagonist pathetic because she believed he was ready for a battle. Just because he left an unfavorable situation, he was simply giving up and handing victory to someone else. He realized she had the same arrogance as her father, the Great Thunder Monarch. Like father, like daughter, they were the same. But Kim didn't lower himself. He only said she had won the duel and that it was fine. Even so, she felt disappointed because she believed he was an idiot, but at least a strong idiot. Before leaving, he called her. After all, she still owed him that little discount coupon for losing the cookie on the train. Shin got even more irritated hearing that. Soon her next opponent appeared in the arena. But the girl didn't seem excited for the duel at all. The moment the fight started, she simply channeled a thunder from the skies that obliterated her enemy. Without even reacting, the guy fell to his knees, already defeated. Shin just watched, noticing that the girl looked very nervous, to the point that they had to remove another duelist from the arena. Her look clearly showed anger toward the protagonist. Shin asked if everything was fine between them because she seemed a bit irritated, and angering the daughter of the Great Thunder Monarch didn't seem like the best idea in the world. The other students started whispering that the rookie probably gave up because Shin was too strong. Then they started calling him a coward, and that was just fine for him. Soon the next duelist was called to the arena, and Kim appeared again. She entered with weapons in hand. Shin started taking notes. She seemed to be a shooter. This duel between the two girls promised to be interesting since shooters are naturally stronger against mages. The two made a bet. Kim believed Shin with her electric powers would win, while Yo trusted her precious weapons. The duel began and Yo started shooting everything she had. She fired elemental bursts against the mage, who raised her hands and created an electric barrier blocking all projectiles. It was exactly what Kim expected. Shin had a great mana reserve and could perform multiple channelings at once. Then she summoned 2 electric hummingbirds toward the shooter, who had to dodge quickly to avoid being hit by the paralyzing attack. Shin seemed to have discovered something in the previous duel, as now she controlled the hummingbirds in the middle of the arena. One of them ended up touching Yo's face, and she felt an electric current run through her whole body, falling to the ground. Kim commented that this would greatly slow down the shooter's movements since she had been hit by the electric hummingbird. The next attack would be guaranteed. But at that moment, Yo pulled out a kind of grenade from her pouch and threw it toward the mage. It was a smoke bomb that spread all over the field. A brilliant move that completely removed the opponent's vision. Shin couldn't see an inch ahead because of the smoke. Then she heard more shots being fired. One of them hit her back, but the girl was prepared as she had an electric net blocking the attacks from behind. Meanwhile, Yo took another weapon and set it up right in the middle of the arena. Shin called her rich. After all, a student using an invisibility cloak to hide in the smoke was something only rich people did. Now with that new weapon, her shots were even more powerful. Only 2 minutes of the duel remained. Yo disappeared from sight, thanks to the invisibility cloak. Shin realized that girl was a true hunter and couldn't locate her. Yo sneaked across the field, and another shot was fired. Shin managed to block again with her electric net, and the moment the projectile touched it, she turned toward the shooter. She placed her palm on the ground and channeled an electric field around her. That made Yo jump really high, trying to escape the discharge. It was exactly what Shin wanted. She said she had her. After all, she couldn't dodge in midair, so she sent the electric hummingbird. The attack hit Yo directly, leaving her paralyzed in the air. The duel time ended at that exact moment, with Yo falling onto the arena still electrified. Shin wondered if she had lost the duel, but actually she had won. She managed to paralyze her opponent. Even so, it was clear that Yo had held up well against her. The protagonist won the bet and received his silver coins. Next, Gory entered the arena wielding his 2 swords. His opponent was Jojo, the disciple of the King of Fists. Kim bet on the disciple of the King of Fists. Shin mocked him, saying Kim was going against all his friends. But that wasn't what he was doing. Actually, he was evaluating the strength of the opponents, and it was clear they were quite powerful. Even so, that match promised to be unusual. After all, Gory was excited and determined to show his skill and win. When he removed his sword, Jojo asked if he wouldn't use that big sword on his back. Cracking his knuckles, he took a fighting stance, saying it wouldn't be easy to defeat him. Thus the two called each other for a one-on-one, and the duel began with Jojo charging forward, fists raised. And for such a big guy, he was quite fast with his punches. One of his hands started channeling a burning flame that hit Gory's sword and dragged him several meters across the arena. It seemed that impact was terrifying, and his sword was vibrating. Jojo didn't give any space, advancing again, now with both fists on fire. Gory needed to end it all with a single move, so he started channeling the blue sword technique. But when he struck those fists, his sword was completely destroyed, and since it was in pieces, he just asked to withdraw because he couldn't continue. Jojo also received an injury and said he looked forward to another duel against the swordsman. It was just as Kim expected. Iron swords couldn't withstand all of Gory's power. After all, he had very severe techniques that consumed a lot of mana, to the point that normal swords couldn't handle them. Shin's jaw dropped because Kim had predicted all the results correctly. But our boy put his hand on her shoulder, saying she owed him 5 more silver coins. Shin didn't have any money left there, but that was fine. The protagonist wanted to be paid with more information, so the gang went for lunch. After all, man doesn't live by duels alone. Shin asked what kind of information our hero wanted, and he replied that he wanted to know about the promising talents and the factions forming within the academy. He explained that there were 4 major factions within the academy: the Murim Alliance, the Union Guild, the Tower Magic Society, and the Order of Knights. Each faction had its own leader. In the Murim Alliance, they had Moyoung. In the Tower Society, they had Hong. In the Union Guild, they had Nari. And there was still a hidden talent. In the Order of Knights, they had the son of the Great Sword Master. Each of them was extremely powerful. And when he started explaining that Kim would be the strongest, Shin received a phone call and almost forgot about it. She ran off because she had an interview with the club president, and the protagonist and Yo were left alone at lunch. She seemed much quieter than usual and ended up apologizing for losing her cookie that day on the train. She gave him a little coupon as a gift and showed him a cake to share. While they ate, she asked what he thought of her defeat to Shun. He simply said it really was difficult to destroy magical barriers with bullets of that level, and then he showed her that if she infused mana into her bullets, she could do it. She asked if that meant she had to train her mana, and it seems she had never done that before. Kim asked how she created her magic bullets. Actually, she just made them without any special technique. Kim was surprised because that was the same as being a genius among geniuses. She knew nothing about magic, she just acted on instinct. Then he said he could help her create magic bullets. Starting mana training and learning magic would be very easy for her. But now they had to go somewhere else, to the Wind Dungeon, because there would be a new exam. They would have a time limit of 10 minutes in the mysterious forest just behind. In 10 minutes, they had to score as many points as possible by defeating monsters. And to make it fair, there would be a zone blocking all equipment, and everyone would enter as rank F, meaning they had to fight almost naked, so they needed to be extra careful. Time passed, and the students returning were completely dazed by the hits they took inside. Doc was just calling them pathetic. Only 2 people managed to finish, so he called the next group, our protagonists. Kim said that for this exam, Yo could use her precision rifle. He started explaining how she could use mana while Shin just watched annoyed by it. Then each of them entered a different portal. Our guy came out of the portal, and all his equipment had been downgraded in rank. It looked like he really needed to be careful in this place. Right behind, some kind of mass started to form. He pulled the staff from the inventory, and that being started chasing him. When the time began, the creature turned into a small goblin, but Kim swung his staff and sent it flying far away. Judging by the direction it came from, that goblin helped him imagine where the others would appear. He took the dagger the little monster dropped and threw it toward where a new mass was forming. Before the monster was even summoned, it was defeated with a dagger to the eye. It dropped dead on the ground. Taking advantage, Kim grabbed its big axe too, because it was time to collect some points and rank up with these things. The protagonist started a true siege inside the forest, and the monster's sounds were just screams and fear. 3 minutes passed, and then a troll and a giant were created too. He quickly realized that direction was one he shouldn't go. By that point, he had already reached 680 points in only 3 minutes. Since he got a good score, he earned the reward of 1 more skill copying slot. So instead of continuing, he decided to give up and return. When he exited the portal, he saw Yo completely wrecked and exhausted. She had reached 781 points and asked if it had been very hard for him in the portal. The professor looked at our guy, thinking he might not have the mindset to be a hunter. After all, he had just given up, but then he analyzed his score chart. He realized Kim had achieved that score in only 3 minutes, so he decided to keep an eye on this boy. Next, Gory also entered one of the portals to take his test. It seemed the person with the highest score there was the son of the Great Sword Master. Maybe Gory, if he used all his skill, could score even higher. At least that's what our guy was thinking. And as expected, he jumped straight to first place with over 1,000 points. When he returned, he was fine, healthy, without a single scratch. He thanked the tip our protagonist gave him before entering the portal, especially about resting after dueling in the PvP arena. The other students started complaining, saying how could a coward hold the top spot. Kim had to stop his friend, who was already getting angry and wanted to hit those punks. It was fine, no need to stoop down to fight low-level people. Gory took a deep breath and calmed himself, keeping his mind steady. Then they kept staring at the big scoreboard. There was still one high-level person left to score, and it was Shun, who was inside the portal, channeling all her electric magic. She got startled for a moment because she was only paralyzing the monsters, not killing them quickly. But she soon remembered what Kim had said to his partner outside. She realized she needed to improve her mana control to defeat those monsters. She hated to admit it, but because of the mana limitation in that area, she would have to use another strategy. In any case, she decided to use her electric enchantment ability. Minutes later, she exited the portal with only 570 points. The little trio then saw Shun come out, and she looked a bit embarrassed when facing the protagonist, since those words still echoed in her mind. Doc announced the end of the exam and told everyone to rest for the next day's class. From now on, they were all dismissed. Going to the administration office, Doc went to check student Kim's stats. He asked for the replay of what Kim had done in the exam, but the secretary was shocked because all the data had been erased from the mysterious forest. If Kim had kept going at that pace, he could have easily surpassed 2,000 points. Doc thought that if he was hiding his abilities, he could only be a dragon servant or an apostle of the evil god. He needed to keep a very close eye on this boy. The secretary asked if they should inform the director, but Doc said no. He said it was better to gather more information and observe carefully. He would try not to raise suspicion, especially since Kim hadn't shown his claws yet, but for sure he wouldn't stop watching this kid. Then the scene changed to a cafe. Our little trio was there, and Kim was once again falling asleep. It was already 3 in the afternoon. After getting some drinks, Gory started complaining that the book was almost impossible to understand. All the academy rules were really complex, but when he took his ID, he saw he had more than 3,000 accumulated points. Those points were earned inside the dungeons, like the one they did earlier. They could use those points to get items and resources within the academy, but they could also buy recordings of other people's dungeon runs, and that's what the protagonist did. He bought the recording of the swordswoman, Saman. Besides that, students could also sell their own recordings to earn more money. The recordings were used to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of all the students, especially those at the academy's top rank. After all, if he could plan well, he could even defeat the strongest ones. Kim also told Gory that he could go to the special training center. It was a place where one could accumulate even more mana. The big guy was completely happy to know such a place existed. And yes, the place existed, but it cost 500 points for every 6 hours of use. Kim suggested he shouldn't spend points like that because there was the season pass. Those passes were given only to the best clubs in the academy. But Gory knew that with his current skills he couldn't get one of those. Even so, the protagonist said he would get a pass for him. In return, once he got stronger, they would have to enter the deep dungeon together. Compared to the mysterious forest, the deep dungeon was much more dangerous. Gory, with a trembling voice, said that if one day he became a true strong warrior, he would help Kim. He beat his chest and promised he wouldn't hesitate to give his life to help his companion. Then the protagonist said he would get that pass in 2 weeks. After that, he went to another station. Inside there was a workshop, and an old man was working on some equipment. Kim said he was interested in joining the engineering club. The man took off his glasses and asked if he was serious because it was enough to look around. The workshop was full of work and he didn't have time to waste with rookies. The protagonist just winked and said he would stay quiet in the corner. He noticed that man's engineering skills were around rank B. So he reached out his hand and used his copy ability. That way he obtained the magic engineer skill. Kim started looking around the room and noticed something that caught his attention. With a mischievous smile, he asked the senior about a cube he had found. He said no one in the academy could assemble it because of its high specifications. Kim then bought a catalyst reagent potion and asked if he wanted to trade. The engineer was confused, thinking the trade was kind of dumb since the reagent was really expensive, but in the end he accepted and asked Kim not to tell anyone about the deal. They said goodbye and the engineer was happy to have saved at least 1,000 points. When he picked up the cube, a new mission appeared for our big guy. This mission always appeared in the game and people usually refused it because it seemed useless. But in the end this cube would turn into an S-rank item called the Cube of Life. Then he entered the training room. For someone who had created countless S-rank heroes, this place was a piece of cake. He used his amplification skill, jumping his engineering rank from B to E. Then he placed his hand on the cube and started working on it. He had 1 minute to finish that cube with his S-rank engineering skills. Even at rank S, it would still take 3 days to complete the cube. Then his engineering skill dropped back to rank B, and he had to wait an hour. Only then could he reuse amplification and work on the cube again, since with rank B skill he couldn't even touch something so complex. So he started channeling mana into his core. After 1 hour of meditation, he returned to work on the cube once again. He used amplification again, reaching rank S. He needed to finish this cube in less than 3 days to complete the mission. That's because in a few days an event would happen at the school. In the following days he sat near his friend and unexpectedly she said she woke up early and brought new cookies for the protagonist, this time shaped like dinosaurs. Gory arrived a little late but said that with the training lessons in the practice room he felt stronger and would soon overcome the wall in his mind. Doc arrived right after, telling everyone to be quiet as he slammed the door. He had an announcement to make to the entire class. Arena duels would now be mandatory, and the time would increase to 10 minutes. Each first list had to do at least 3 matches per week. The protagonist knew he needed to win these matches above all. This was the mission Kim had been waiting for, a subquest where he had to complete 3 PvPs. He told his friend to go to the arena because the replays would be very valuable. Yo also tugged on the protagonist's clothes, pulling him and saying she had time to go too. Everyone looked at that with good eyes, thinking the protagonist was really a champion, always flirting with everyone. But that wasn't what they were imagining, it was about her training. So he just said he would meet her later. That afternoon the group went to the arena. The 2 protagonists were there to watch the duels. One of them called the protagonist a coward for running away from the last fight, and Gory tried to defend him, saying they should watch their mouths. But again, the protagonist interrupted, placing a hand on him and told that boy that in the last test he scored 300 points. He asked how much they had scored. One of them got angry, saying 300 points was something only a coward would get. The red-haired one just yelled that he was a nobody, and that if he wanted to prove something he should fight Shin again. Kim replied yes, he would face him. But meanwhile, the redhead got even angrier, his veins popping on his face. He was furious for having the same score as the coward. Then he pointed his spear at him, saying to go down to the arena because he would show him the taste of defeat. Our big guy managed to provoke the nobody, and went down to the arena. The redhead was a spear wielder and positioned himself for battle. Kim also took his magic staff. The duel began and the redhead quickly attacked with the spear, its blade clashing face to face with the protagonist. But he couldn't advance because he was paralyzed by the electric hummingbird. Kim just apologized but explained that he was far below Shin's level. The redhead asked for a minute to recover until he got hit on the head with the staff and fell to the ground. Even down, he said he had been caught off guard and wouldn't lose again. The protagonist just called him for a 1v1. Once more they restarted, but the redhead lost again. He reaffirmed that this time he would really win above all, but Kim just turned and said to leave it for another day because he was too weak. Looking at his quest log, Kim noticed 1 PvP was still missing. Then he turned to the redhead and said he'd accept another duel, but he'd have to pay for it. The redhead pulled from his inventory a pill made by his own family. There was one more condition: the redhead couldn't talk or record anything about that fight. He accepted the payment and said they would restart the battle. Well, at least that was the plan, because the protagonist won once again, leaving the poor extra on the floor, covered in marks from the blows. The redhead kneeled, apologizing for being so greedy. He had judged Kim too quickly because of the last duel, but he wasn't a coward. Kim just told him to keep that same mindset. After all, he wanted to keep being seen as a coward at the academy. The redhead didn't even try to ask why, knowing it was useless. Meanwhile, Gory had already won 2 battles too. As soon as he won the 3rd, he would go after Kim. Going to our guy's side, he found Yo, who was in the magic room. She was ready to train her special bullets. She started projecting ammo in her hand, and it was truly amazing to see her doing that without knowing anything about magic or mana. But Kim explained that now she would learn about mana distribution. So let's go to her match with another student. The opposing duelist was hiding between areas using his magic, but nothing could escape Yo's eyes, which made everything visible. The mage was confident that his barrier wouldn't fall to simple magic shots, until the bullet grazed his cheek, completely destroying the shield. He was utterly shocked to see the power of that projectile. Yo just gave a small smile while keeping her aim on him. She fired another shot while he was just apologizing. That way she won the duel without difficulties. That night we were taken to the replay of that spear guy's match, and it was the teacher who was watching our protagonist's movements. It's not like he did anything special, but even so he managed to win the duel. The teacher also observed Shin's duel with the other green-haired boy. It seemed like the people around the protagonist were getting good victories at the academy, and he wondered who the hell Kim was to achieve so much. At that same moment on the other side, the protagonist had just finished assembling that cube. This cube increased the effects of life-giving items by 3 times. He managed to speed up the process because of that pill he earned from defeating the redhead. That way we reached the next day. The protagonist was walking down the corridor when he saw a druid. She was Nari, and she had a tiger by her side. She was one of the leaders of the union group, and animals like her tiger were extremely sensitive to life energy. The big cat simply jumped inside the protagonist's box. Nari apologized while trying to retrieve her pet, but as she got closer she also sensed all that energy and life buffs. Even so, she pulled the tiger out, even though it didn't want to leave. She introduced herself and apologized again for letting her pet enter the box, saying they'd meet another time. After that we went to a class with an old lady presenting history. For some reason the protagonist could only think about lunch, and there was only 1 minute left. When the teacher dismissed everyone, there were still 30 seconds left, and the moment the timer hit 0, Shin was stretching when he saw an orb appear in the middle of the room. That red orb released violent energy all around the environment. Nothing serious happened, everyone was fine, but electricity ran through everyone's bodies. A number appeared on Shin's forehead, and the same happened to the other students. That was the secret inspection to check the students' items. If they were carrying banned or forbidden things, they would be expelled. The protagonist knew who was behind all of this. The three were just watching everything happen. While Yo took her beauty nap, those who were marked would have serious problems. Kim quickly approached Shin and asked if he needed help. He was crying with his inventory open because he didn't want to lose what he had earned, so he begged for the protagonist's help. But Kim acted tough and stood up to leave. Shin lowered his head and said he would do anything for his new boss. The protagonist told him to put the banned item inside his box. There was no time to explain, he just needed to put it in there, because he heard the inspection group arriving at the door, and that group was the school council itself. Shin told whoever was hiding to get up, and the protagonist just said he was resting behind the counter. Shin noticed that little boy had a mark on his forehead and asked what kind of item he was carrying. He also pointed a holobite directly at the protagonist. After all, he was sure he carried something forbidden, but the crystal was just there, existing, doing nothing. Once again she got embarrassed and just told him to sit down. Shin was doing everything to find a loose end in the protagonist. She inspected the room collecting the students' items, but the most important part now was making trades inside the school. Outside, Shin thanked him immensely, saying he would now serve faithfully under his new boss. Kim just said he would leave the banned items in the room later. All the contraband items from the black market ended up in one part of the academy. They were heading to the Thieves' Club, and Shin was soon kicked out. A girl started stomping on him, saying he needed to say the secret words. Right after the protagonist introduced himself, she was Danny, the leader of the Thieves' Club. She had also heard everything that happened earlier on, that B-wave. Upon returning to the room, she saw the box full of forbidden items. She couldn't believe all those items were there and had gone unnoticed. Kim just said that his box was very special, and that if anyone tried to take something from inside, the alarm would go off. The girl asked what exactly he wanted. After all, finding that place wasn't hard, but he didn't seem to have much to offer. Kim said he needed something the Thieves' Club had. He wanted access to the temporary vault. Danny turned to him, staring deeply, and asked who the hell he was. The temporary vault was where confiscated items after being banned were stored. Danny asked if he was by any chance a spy sent by the committee, but he just raised his hand, denying it, and said he had some items he needed to retrieve from inside. Danny didn't like that. She said it had taken her too long to find that vault, and she wouldn't allow access just for a handshake. So the protagonist decided to negotiate. He knew she had found the vault, but getting in and out of there was way too hard, so he promised he could make that possible for her, and she was tempted by the offer. After all, entering that vault was truly complicated. There was no denying it, it was a temptation for any thief. That same night, the thieves group was getting ready, and it seemed all of Danny's goons were there. Yesterday they even asked who the newbie was, so Danny introduced him. He would be today's main operator. The guys asked if he could really be trusted, but before that, up front, a girl was typing on her laptop saying she was ready. They had 1 minute to start going in and stealing the items, so they cast a sort of silent magic on their feet and everyone sped toward the vault. That ability was Silent Steps, a rank B spell. Kim just pointed his hand at the leader, copying that ability from her too. At the door stood one of the committee men, and he noticed some butterflies flying around. One of those butterflies landed on his shoulder. They were the butterflies of darkness, which exploded and chained the council member completely with black bindings. The group started invading the 3rd floor. Inside, another guard was on duty and spotted the thieves. When he yelled about intruders, he tried to cast his magic, but was quickly captured by the other 2 members of the gang. That way they just ran to the other side. Danny said the temporary vault was after the next corner, but before turning she used a mirror and saw that the guard was huge and carried a massive axe. He was a 3rd-year rank a student called Infernal Axe. Kim asked if Danny knew how to use shadow dreams. She found it strange that he knew about it, but yes, she did. Then the protagonist boosted her skill from rank C to rank A. She was stunned and asked how he managed that. But there was no time, so he just told Danny to recast that spell on the axe guy. So she raised her hands and summoned several butterflies. Those shadow butterflies flew toward the axe man. He realized it was a seduction art, so he started swinging at the butterflies. However, there were too many and too small to hit. Then a dark explosion happened, binding the Axeman completely even though he was rank A. She just turned and said they needed to talk later, but kept going toward the secret vault door. Now was the perfect time for the protagonist to do his shopping with his box. That place contained all the Academy's banned items. Quickly, he ran to a chest and found 2 paralysis stones. He needed to find elemental items and also books. Then he found something very interesting in that pile of books. Since he had no combat skills, that fist technique book would be useful. But right at the door, one of the council members appeared, mocking the little thieves. They seemed to be the school council presidents. Danny turned pale because those guys weren't supposed to be there. One of them ordered everyone to stop and follow in silence. It couldn't get any worse. Danny knew that if she followed those guys, things could really get ugly. So she raised her hands, ordering all her men to escape. She used Shadow Paradise and engulfed all her subordinates inside that space. They turned into shadows and managed to flee. The guards reported that several people had fled from the 3rd floor and shouldn't be allowed to escape. Our hero was running down the same corridor he came from, until he saw a violent movement coming his way. He quickly ducked, or else his head would have been smashed against the wall. Kim did that and saw it was Jai, who praised the boy's good reflexes and said they had already identified most of the Thieves' Club, but had never seen him before. It was a new face. Then he began controlling his earth elemental magic, making several spikes rise from the ground. Kim summoned his electric bird, but Jai warned that wouldn't be enough while creating 2 cannons on the ground. Those cannons fired several huge projectiles, but the electric hummingbird managed to hit Jai's shoulder, leaving him electrified. At that moment, the protagonist didn't counterattack, he just ran along the side. Jai mocked, saying it was a nice move, but there was no way he'd escape with so many cannons summoned. He told him to say goodbye because he had already lost. The cannons began firing non-stop, forming even a cloud of smoke from all the shots. He knew no one could escape from there, but started to wonder why the place was getting so hot. It was because Kim had his hand burning, punching all the cannons. Jai saw that it was a forbidden technique, so he raised 3 barriers, but the pro's fist was already ready. He used the Infernal Fist technique and struck, destroying all 3 barriers along with Jai. It seemed quite hard to control that fist, and the punch was enough to leave Jai on the ground. Sooner or later they would find out he was the bearer of the flaming fist. He then heard guards coming from behind and quickly disappeared from there. On the other side, Danny was in the room. Actually, since she was their leader, she ended up getting caught, and the guys asked her to be quick and give the names of everyone involved. They also gave her a list of all the items that disappeared, saying they were very valuable and forbidden in the academy. But she just claimed not to know anything, had never seen any of that before. Of course she was pretending, but since they had no proof that the items were with her, they eventually released her. Outside, the other goons waited, and Danny found it strange to see only 3 members there. Shin told her not to hide anything, since they had the information that one of the members was using the Infernal Fist. But Danny had no idea who that Kim guy was. That same night, upon returning to the Thieves' Cube, Danny quickly went to check the protagonist's arm, but it seemed he was completely unharmed. Then she pulled out from her bag the life cube. The big girl started drooling, because all the forbidden items they had stolen were inside it. Those items were powerful, expensive, and very hard to find. Before leaving, Danny asked if our big guy didn't want to join her club. He found it funny to get an offer to join the Thieves' Club. Actually, that club fit perfectly with the protagonist. After all, he was greedy, annoying, and arrogant. But anyway, he just declined the offer, thanking her. And if it was just for the cube, he intended to sell it later. After all, he needed an item called Season Pass. Kim also said that this B-Wave had another purpose and that he would tell her everything, but had a request. He needed to deliver a message to the Magic Engineering Club. The information was that a freshman had managed to complete the hidden cube. Now she understood why the cube was so expensive. But before leaving, she warned that her offer was still up and valid for him, so he'd better think carefully about the proposal. The protagonist just sighed, thanking her. A few days passed at the academy. The protagonist was walking with Yo because of her training. It was noticeable that some council members were watching them from afar. He asked Yo to go ahead because he had some things to take care of. He'd meet her again soon. She also noticed that those 2 troublemakers were following them. Then Kim turned and asked what they wanted. They introduced themselves as members of the Emerald Tower. The girls said their captain was interested in the protagonist, but Kim said he wasn't affiliated with any tower and didn't need to go with them. The green-haired guy just put on his glove, ready for battle. However, right in front of him was the electric hummingbird. The guy took a huge electric shock, screaming in pain. Then he fell stiff on the floor. Kim just warned that if they wanted threats, they'd better attack first. The girl raised her hands, apologized, and said she would take them back properly. After that they could talk again. She said the rumor about him being a coward was false. At that very moment, a projectile hit the green-haired guy's head. Right after, it also hit the blue-haired girl. She wondered why she was hit so precisely while falling. Both rolled over there on the floor by the entrance. Kim arrived a few seconds later in the room. It looked like he was the one who had done that. Up front, they talked about a raid that was going to happen. They would go down to the map called Goblin Cave. Shin called the swordsman Gori to go with him. Now he didn't know how to answer. After all, he wanted to go with his leader. But the protagonist already had someone he wanted to bring along. Yo was holding his coat, asking to form a duo. On the other side, the green-haired guy was pinned to the wall, apologizing to the man ahead. It seemed he had put his subordinates in a bad spot, because they couldn't convince that coward. The man called the 2 who were hunted pathetic. He said he had a bad feeling about the new guy. This was Izo, the leader of the Nature Club. He was very curious about the box the protagonist carried, and wanted to make Kim pay for ignoring the Emerald Tower. The subordinate asked for another chance, since he had been caught off guard earlier. Izo ordered him to complete the mission, warning that if he failed again, he'd be expelled from the club. The guy was confident he could win. Because of that, Izo lent his great guzzle to the subordinate to finish the mission. That way we go to the Goblin Camp. The protagonist received another submission to clear the whole place. Up ahead, 2 small goblins came rushing in at high speed. Without difficulty, he shot them down. The girl had gotten stronger after she started practicing her mana. Then a strong enemy appeared. It was the goblin sub-boss. Kim told her to wait, while she asked if he wanted to face the enemy. She answered yes. Strong monsters gave bonus points. Kim gave her support, summoning his electric bird. It was just a distraction to draw the goblin's attention. While it got electrified, she positioned herself and shot behind the big goblin's head. But it wasn't effective, and he looked at her in rage. In the blink of an eye, he lunged toward the shooter. The sword was in front of her, about to strike. But the protagonist used amplification, boosting the electric hummingbird's ability against the big monster. The beast was paralyzed in front of the shooter with her weapon charged. A single shot marked the end of the dungeon. It seemed they earned many points for clearing the place quickly. The girl asked if Kim had any tips about magic bullets. It was clear that she had a competitive spirit and would become stronger in the future. He said yes, and that they would train at the training center later. And the later was literally now. They went there. The hero said she used weapons very well, but only as tools. He told her to imagine that she had a magical weapon in her hand while projecting ammunition on her fingers and shooting with a flick. This was the principle of creating magical ammunition and putting it into tools. Quickly, she managed to copy the ammunition in front of her fingers, but messed up badly. The ammunition stopped right above the protagonist's head. It was really difficult to manipulate and fire the ammunition on the fingers. Kim just told her to keep practicing, that way she would become much stronger. Our boy was about to have dinner, but she stopped him for a moment and handed him a Visa Black Power Ultra Power card. That way Kim could buy whatever he wanted at the cafeteria. Next to them were the disciplinary council members, raising their hands to the protagonist. Shin turned to see who Kim was, and even broke his fork upon seeing the worst person in the school in front of him. He got up asking for a moment with Kim and asked to look at her hands. He knew she was suspicious, because the academy intruder had used the electric bird and the flaming fist. She was curious to expose the protagonist. He asked what kind of surprise she could read from his hands. Then he just showed all of them. She started rotating his hands to check for any injuries. Kim asked if his hands were soft, because she had been holding them for a long time. The girl turned completely embarrassed. The protagonist asked if she read that he would find love soon. She just told him to stop joking and left sulking. The next day, Nari Dupriya returned to training. She fired her ammunition even faster. It seemed that from yesterday to today she had more targets and more precision. The duo was practically unstoppable, with the protagonist providing support. This time the gigantic goblin was defeated much faster than the day before. They completed the place in a much shorter time. The protagonist greatly praised Yo, saying the fight had been almost perfect. Rarely the girl was smiling, and it was a very beautiful smile. Days later they faced some dungeons alone. The protagonist wanted to see how Yo would perform alone in the portals. He entered the goblin camp and without wasting time summoned his infernal fist. The fist emanated so much flame and mana that with one strike it destroyed a large path. All the monsters there were obliterated to ashes. The entire forest burned from the strike. He completed the dungeon in 18 seconds. He wondered if he had overdone it, but managed to complete his submission. He gained some skills, including the Blessing of the Wind. An elemental wind aura began projecting from his hands. The protagonist was happy because now he could also be a wind-type support mage. When he exited the portal, the Green Club group was waiting for him. They called him to have a coffee together. At the cafeteria, they went straight to the point. They knew the protagonist carried a special item. He already knew what it was. He projected the large life cube in front of them. Nari's tiger ran inside the cube, throwing itself in. It seemed the item was real. It emanated a huge life power. One of the girls asked if she could see the item's description. Of course, they would protect all information with the club's honor. Yahello was shocked to see that the item multiplied life power several times. They asked if he was interested in selling it. The protagonist was undecided. Yahello said he would find the true value of the item on his property. The protagonist understood everything they said, but hesitated for his own reasons. The girl asked what he wanted. They could give him anything he wanted. Kim asked for 4 special training passes. The most unusual request was a blank skill book. Yahello found that very greedy since the passes could be obtained, but the blank book was rare. The protagonist took the book from his box. After all, negotiations would go nowhere. Nari said she had the blank book and hadn't used it yet because she hadn't found any good skills. It seemed her little companion liked the box a lot and wanted to buy it. The club agreed to negotiate with the protagonist. The conditions were met, so they carried out the trade. The protagonist thanked them and took the passes and the blank book. The green-haired boy stood up, challenging the protagonist to a duel. Quickly, Kim refused. He saw no reason. He wouldn't gain anything. Last time they tried to ambush him with 2 people. He turned and said the green-haired guy had no honor at all. Yahello pulled a VIP card, saying he would bet on the duel. The protagonist turned calmly and just accepted. They decided to duel in 2 days. Kim needed to master the book first. He laughed because mastering a skill in 2 days was almost impossible. In the end, everyone agreed. 2 days later, the protagonist group gathered in the arena. They told Danny that he had accepted the duel against the Nature Club. She was worried because members usually use dirty tricks. In the arena, the lettuce-haired guy told our protagonist not to run. He said everything was being recorded so everyone could see the duel between them. Somewhat reluctantly, the protagonist still accepted, and so did the lettuce-haired guy. Thus, the aura of both began to emanate, and a portal was created to start the exam. They were thrown into the Black Zone. It was a random map in the middle of the desert. The lettuce-haired guy opened his arms and said he would show the level difference between them. But the protagonist moved his fingers and a powerful gust of wind passed through the lettuce-haired guy. The guy was simply thrown to the ground. Kim asked what level difference that was and told him to get up because he was being too dramatic over just a little wind. The lettuce-haired guy got angry and began conjuring a rock ball at full strength toward the protagonist. But Kim grabbed the giant rock, using only the power of wind, and started playing, spinning the rock around. Then he threw it back toward the lettuce-haired guy with full force. It must have hurt because smoke spread everywhere. The lettuce-haired guy was already lying on the ground, lamenting having started the duel, but he got up again, admitting that Kim really wasn't a coward. He said he wouldn't win because he was about to show his trump card, placing both hands on the ground. A gigantic nature golem began to appear. Danny knew they were going to bring a trap to the battlefield, and began wondering if this really applied to the arena. She saw that her subordinate had to use that item. After all, the protagonist wasn't going to win, and Danny knew many people were watching. He couldn't use the infernal fists. The gigantic golem had an eye that pierced the protagonist's soul. Kim just stared with a serious look, because 2 days ago he had been studying in the training room. He wondered what was the best type of support and skill. For any situation, there was a very important unique skill for support. The lettuce-haired guy yelled for Kim to show if he had any other card up his sleeve. He ordered the golem to stomp the protagonist. Our hero managed to dodge, jumping onto the golem's arm. Since he was now using wind skills, he replicated an important ability from the blank spellbook. With a large gust of wind, he sent the golem flying backward. The skill was the most basic of all, the force of wind, imbued with amplification. The entire crowd for the protagonist began praising his victory. Yahello was nervous because his subordinate lost even with the golem, so he had to give up the VIP card. Kim suggested leaving the video recording in private mode. The Emerald Tower could have problems if it leaked that they lost to the rookie. It could also be considered a favor they might collect on in the future. It was a way for the protagonist to remain anonymous in the academy, without showing his true strength. He was satisfied for having acquired the Wind Force skill. The protagonist's little group arrived, praising his good work. As promised, the protagonist gave the season pass. He said it would take 2 weeks to get it for Gory. Danny asked if he had a gift for her too. Kim asked if she had done the favor he had requested before. She answered yes, spreading the news that he unlocked the cube for the Magic Engineering Club. This was a perfect team for the protagonist. He went to a magical engineering workshop. The vibe of the place was completely different from the rest of the academy. Upon entering, a veteran came to greet him. It was Bong, the leader of the engineering club, and he asked for a moment with the protagonist. He had heard that Kim had achieved a great feat. He asked if he really completed the complex 10x10x10 cube. Technically, this type of cube would take years to solve. Since it was something rare, Bong wanted to see the cube again. The protagonist stated that he had already gotten rid of the item. The cube was now with the Nature Club. The engineer got angry. He really wanted to see the completed cube, but he was surprised when the protagonist showed the formula for solving the cube. Not only that, he showed all the settings and pieces. It was unbelievable, but something was missing. Bong asked if he had the remaining information. The protagonist did not, but had a condition. He wanted access to the engineering equipment workshop. Bong handed over the rest of the papers. The protagonist wanted to see the formula for everything, and then Bong would release him. Meanwhile, Bong asked if Yo wanted to join the club. She stood up and said that a talent like Kim was rare and would get along very well with the engineers. The protagonist thanked her but declined to join the group. Kim was satisfied for having managed to get close to crafting a terminal-level weapon. Then they went to another area. There was Izo complaining that they lost something very important today. In fact, Kim was complaining about the second-in-command. Izo suspected that Kim had not acted alone in the duel arena. He asked if someone was interfering. I turned angrily, asking if this was some interference from the disciplinary committee. The second-in-command stated that he shouldn't judge before seeing the facts, so I asked for a chance to investigate all this. The leader stated that I would have 2 months to do this, which would be when the new ranks were released at the academy. The second-in-command had no objections, just nodded as if agreeing. I just left while the boys stayed alone in the corridor. Then I turned, calling for Chum. Did I know they were spying? Actually, I knew she had observed the duel earlier as well. She, having watched Kim a lot, asked if I had seen anything strange about him, or if his hands were burned from the flaming fists. The boy just thought for a moment, because it was strange to think about Kim. Still the similarity, that same look, that arrogant way. He definitely was one of the thieves that day. So he just apologized to his freshman. She got excited, saying that the veteran didn't need to apologize. Her mission was to capture the thief from that day. Thus we moved to a few weeks later, realizing that a new dungeon would appear. This was a special mission that everyone would have to complete to advance to the next classes. The mentorship programs also began. Gory quickly selected the protagonist as his mentor. He had no doubt it had to be him. After all, he was stronger. They even asked if Yo would do the same, but she was there taking her usual nap. She still had a lot to learn, so she needed mentoring. The girl began waking up after so many hours of sleep. She didn't know what was happening, but just grabbed the protagonist, saying he was her duo. Well, it seemed their concern was unnecessary. Gory just stood up. After all, he had to go train first. So let's move on to the next day. The boys met in the dungeon arena. Kim was completely surprised because the aura spinning around his swordsman friend was much larger. Gory asked the protagonist how the duel went yesterday. If we go back to the previous day, Hong was channeling all his firepower behind a large shield bearer. The protagonist could analyze the entire field, while everyone around was hit by the flames. He couldn't aim properly because of the fire coming toward him. But without wasting time, Kim jumped onto the dynamic duo with his staff in hand. Then he used his elemental magic and the force of wind, touched the shield of the shield bearer, and sent him flying away. The staff was face to face with Hong, who was completely astonished. The protagonist didn't need to do anything else, and she just gave up. At that moment it seemed that the two were also looking for a duel match. Gory was impressed because Kim could only lose if it was on purpose. The protagonist just joked that they were just kids. Then they managed to find a duel match. The two were transported to a desert and were surprised because their opponents were Yo and the strange samurai. It was the perfect chance for the protagonist to test his friend. He told Gory that they would win. When the match began, he only asked to be careful with Yo's reflexes and shots. She started by throwing a smoke bomb to leave the area. The protagonist managed to dissipate all the smoke using his wind magic. He didn't waste time jumping back and shooting several times. The protagonist could follow those shots, and suddenly the girl switched to a sniper rifle. Kim just hit the rifle with his staff, destabilizing her. With his left fist he channeled the wind aura, and brought a punch close to her head. At the final moment, he just flicked her on the forehead and asked if they should continue the battle. She gave up since she had lost humiliatingly. Right behind, a more interesting competition was happening. Gory was fighting equally with that swordsman. In fact, he was pressuring the swordsman, who was twice his size. The protagonist's voice interrupted the duel, and Kim said he knew the big guy was hiding his skills. The guy replied that he didn't know him, but now he was fighting seriously. The protagonist said they could have a private duel, and he would give motivation if needed. He whispered his title, Ghost Shadow, Yuri. The guy trembled in fear, asking how he knew about his title. Kim replied that he would reveal everything if he won the duel. This gave motivation to Ghost Shadow, who gripped his sword. He was motivated to attack, and Gory could feel that the opponent's aura had changed, so much that Yuri let out a long sigh. In a fraction of a second he flew at Gory with his sword in hand. The sword grazed Gory's face, and the two began to fight intensely. In fact, Gory was only defending the attacks. Ghost Shadow stopped for a moment and widened his eyes, because Gory had stopped moving. He was going to take advantage of the gap to attack fully, but Gory dodged at the last instant. With his sword he used the swift current piercing the swordsman. Yuri was left speechless, while Gory's sword was completely destroyed. Kim said that was enough to show his skills. Now the two could rest, while emanating wind aura from their fingers. The boys fell to the ground at the same time. The protagonist group ended up winning, because he was still standing and had high expectations for Gory. He was evolving a lot. On the other side, Yuri woke up faster and it seemed he had really lost the encounter. Kim just stood up, praising that it was still an excellent duel, regardless of the result. He asked Kim if it was that obvious that he was hiding his martial skills. The protagonist answered yes. After all, he was holding the sword in a very strange way. It seemed like just an ordinary sword, which clearly didn't match him. After all, they were also in the Dragon Hunter Academy. Here only the strongest prevail. Yuri respectfully thanked him for showing his weaknesses. He was still curious why Kim knew his true title, but they wouldn't talk about that today. Thus the duel ended, and they returned to the academy. The boy praised that the swordsman created many openings for combat, but now he was sad because another of his swords had completely broken. He was financially struggling, so buying more swords would be bad. The protagonist removed a book from his bag saying that there were no rules and that the item could only be purchased with coins. Gory currently had 5,000 credit points. The boy made him spend everything on several really poor quality swords, and they also got some chemical potion reagents. The protagonist went to the engineering club. After all, he needed to make an item for his friend. Inside he found Bong doing experiments, and he seemed extremely focused on the item in front of him. Once again, the protagonist extended his hand, trying to copy his skill. This time he copied Mage Engineering and looked around. It seemed that the place was a treasure post. They were abandoned projects of Bong, so could he manage to make something decent? They were items easy to dismantle. The protagonist sat at the table behind and began crafting his own item. Bong asked what he was trying to do and if he could watch the little genius working on that item. He was surprised to see that the materials being dismantled were completely clean. He was even more surprised to see that liquid perfectly prepared. The protagonist asked if the veteran wanted to trade items once again. Then he began listing several important items, explaining the use of each. The veteran started taking notes item by item. The real Bong appeared running desperate at the door. He quickly went to attend the protagonist and pulled from the inventory all the items Kim had requested in messages. He asked if he could really dismantle all those items so easily, and that if he succeeded he would pay their value. However, the protagonist also needed payment in goods, so he accepted the items on the list. A few items were missing and Bong went after them. Another Bong, whom we will call Bong 2, asked the boy for a favor to dismantle those larger items that were in his office. So let's move on to the next day. He arrived in class much earlier than usual and was surprised to see her there. When I say her, it was Yo, passed out on top of the desk. He asked if she had already eaten breakfast. The girl just murmured, while the protagonist removed a bag of bread. He asked if she was okay after yesterday's match. He said it was good for her to feel defeat from time to time to practice even more. Besides, now she had solid ammunition and could invest even more in support skills. The protagonist wanted to keep teaching her, but another shooter would be more effective. The girl quickly grabbed the bread and decided who would be her mentor through the school list. Gory arrived excited, in perfect condition for another day of training. He thanked the protagonist a lot because it was under his guidance that he was growing. Kim just gave Gory a clip saying he should use it from now on. It looked like just a clip, but it was a very durable protection item. This item increased the durability of the equipment used. Gory placed the item on his suit. Later he went to the duel arena along with another girl. They were dueling against two members of the nature club. The swordsman was apprehensive because Nari was an important piece of the nature group. She played with Buoma, telling him to get ready. The little creature jumped twice her height and turned into a giant monster. When the duel began, the monster ran at the other duo. Gory defended against that violent paw, and his sword began to crack. His companion began casting elemental magic, using the snow palm on the tiger. However, it seemed it hadn't worked very well. The tiger began to freeze little by little, but the big beast wasn't going to give up and attack the girl, sending her flying. Gory shouted because she was the key to immobilizing the little monster. His Heining sword was completely destroyed. However, by using the clip, the sword was fully restored immediately after. The snow girl said she had another method to stop the tiger. Meanwhile, Nari was also restoring his HP. This was a battle of speed. We needed to defeat Nari first. In that case, the two faced each other and jumped directly at the druid controlling the big tiger. However, the blue-haired girl right behind activated an artifact. This was Gaia's barrier, projecting a defense over the two. Several plants began to rise, blocking the warrior's path. The snow girl used her magic to break all of that, while Gory used his fast speed. He didn't expect it to be so easy to break the barrier, but he was completely shocked when the tiger bit the snow girl. The duo ended up losing, since the tiger devoured both. The next day, Kim observed the previous duel and was somewhat embarrassed, not knowing how to win. But Kim knew he had a big problem because of his scarce equipment. Nari, for example, had extremely powerful equipment and a pet. Losing seemed inevitable for him and his duo the previous day. Kim said it was impossible to compare with Nari's items and strength, but it wasn't impossible to have countermeasures to win. He soon stated that the swordsman Shin needed the demon sword. The swordsman had no idea that this item existed, but the protagonist pointed to the clip. The important part was that the sword was now durable. Gory knew he needed to get at least a rank B sword, but it wouldn't be easy. The protagonist pointed backwards, saying it was easy indeed. He just needed to take the item from the dungeon drops. But there was a problem: they couldn't go to the deep dungeons yet, because they didn't have the qualification for that. The deep dungeons were the real combat of the academy. There they were real life or death battle. They couldn't officially go to the deep dungeons, but they could sneak in and get there on their own. The protagonist started sending messages to a certain someone to make this exchange. This someone was Shin, who arrived shortly after. He asked which dungeon they wanted information about. When the protagonist mentioned dungeon number 388, Shin took out his notebook. This was the Serpent Altar, a rank D dungeon. The protagonist and the swordsman faced each other because the place required at least 4 people to complete, but Kim said it would be just the two of them dueling against the place. Shin wrote down their names and said he would be ready the next morning. They wouldn't need to pay for the incursion. After all, he owed the protagonist since that ban. It seemed that Shin was truly honest. In the middle of relaxed conversations, the protagonist asked about another dungeon. He wanted to enter dungeon number 104. Shin still had no information about this dungeon, called the Black Fang Serpent. But it wasn't impossible. He would talk to his boss about it. When he left, Gory asked what the plan was. The plan was simple: enter the Serpent Altar so that Gory could also get an item. Then they would go after the Black Fang Serpent and negotiate that item with the Thieves' Club. However, this dungeon was so dangerous it could cost the lives of both. The protagonist said they needed to follow all his orders and coordinates. He separated some books about that dungeon. He needed to study everything about the place and memorize absolutely everything. They couldn't lose a single word about this dungeon. The next day in the engineer's workshop, Bong brought all the items the protagonist requested. After a little time tinkering with everything, he finally projected the item. The VTV was curious because that item was fascinating. It was the head of a magic staff, and it really was that. But the protagonist still didn't know what kind of staff he was going to use. Let's move on to the afternoon of that day. The teacher explained that they would now have random dungeons with unknown people. They would pair with people from the academy they didn't know, and should work together to complete the dungeons. The protagonist group was worried about this, but it would be good for them to evolve in their combat styles. He instructed his classmates to focus on their weak points. Not long after, Kim entered the dungeon, curious to discover his partner. He hoped it would be a decent companion to help him. He was staring at his copied skills, thinking if he could grab a new one soon. At that moment, another portal was created. Kim was surprised. From the portal came the redhead from the Ruby Tower. It seemed that the two didn't get along very well. Hong had lost to the protagonist several times in the duel arena. She was embarrassed, trembling. The atmosphere was tense, but the protagonist was not intimidated. He asked why she was still standing there. He stared at her with wicked eyes and said they had to run to finish the dungeon. The two started running. Hong didn't understand why the boy wanted to finish the dungeon so quickly, and of all the people in the academy she had to stop with him by her side. She wondered why he was channeling so much wind magic. She realized it made sense. The goblins began to fly in front of them. She found it strange because the number of monsters was decreasing more and more. Supposedly the place wasn't supposed to be that easy. While the protagonist ran ahead, it still seemed that there were monsters alive behind. She understood that the protagonist had left this mission precisely for her to eliminate the rest, and she shouted that the two had to run together. At least she shouted this in her thoughts, not necessarily to him. She felt something different when staring at the protagonist's back. It was as if he had no hesitation while passing through the monsters. Besides, he could charge his spells in just 1 second, and she handled the rest left behind. It was as if Kim had completed this mission more than 1,000,000 times. Then he raised his hand, signaling her to stop. That was because they were very close to the enemy's lair. They approached slowly to observe the hole, and the protagonist told her to go inside to reach it. He gave a wicked look, encouraging her to enter as soon as possible. The poor girl just obeyed and sneaked into the cave. He found it strange, believing she would only cast a fire spell inside, and indeed she cast a fire spell inside the cave. It seemed like it wasn't a good idea, because she exploded along with part of the mountain, causing a huge combustion. The poor girl was right there in the middle, after destroying the entire structure. The protagonist just stared at her through the smoke, as if to say she had done something stupid. But at least they managed to defeat most of the enemies hidden in the lair. However, the protagonist said there was still one left, probably the boss. He felt a shiver and something flying toward him. He quickly pulled Hong by the arm and brought her close, dodging the flying axe. She apologized. While observing the axe, probably her explosive magic had drawn the boss's attention, and that huge monster with 2 axes was likely the area boss. The protagonist stretched his legs and said this would be quick. She could only give small laughs, still out of breath. She didn't understand how they could defeat that monster fast, but she trusted him. Kim left the mission to her because she would defeat the boss alone. She found that strange, but planted her legs firmly on the ground and began capturing the mana from the environment. She put even more fire into her staff, showing her true capacity with the superheating skill. The boss noticed fear invading its being and started screaming at the duo. It leaped toward Hong while she was still channeling her magic. It raised the huge axe for a devastating attack. The girl had to jump and dodge the attack. She ended up losing the casting. Then she used the flaming magic toward the boss, but it was useless because the monster seemed unaffected by the burn. The boss had some elemental resistance to her fire. The beast got angry, using even more force in the axe. It threw it at Hong and the axe flew everywhere. Actually, it had thrown both axes at the girl who kept dodging. At one moment she just closed her eyes, because she was about to be hit. But Kim appeared to provide support and removed the axes from the way using his wind elemental magic. He told the girl not to lower her guard, and asked her to use what she had used in PvP too. She recovered, remembering she was the fire pillar, but felt embarrassed because the power was limited. However, Kim advanced, saying he would trust that attack to her. With wind magic, he began making the boss levitate in the air. She didn't think much and cast her fire magic. A large pillar arose under the boss, who fell to the ground, fleeing the magic circle. The protagonist wouldn't allow it to escape and extended his fingers, signaling he wanted to play more with the big guy. He brought it close with his magic. While the boss remained in the circle, Hong said she was ready to channel and that Kim needed to move away. Kim jumped away, since the boss threw the axe again. It was the perfect moment for Hong to channel her flame pillar. She spent a lot of mana to cast everything. She extended her hand in front of the staff and released the magic completely. A large pillar rose around the boss. The ogre stared at all that fire. Kim was dissatisfied seeing Hong use so much power, because the fire pillar was more powerful than in PvP. They managed to complete the dungeon together. Hong looked very tired after using large-scale magic. It seemed she had exhausted herself more than usual. She called the protagonist and asked for a favor. After going through humiliating situations, including being close to him, she asked that the dungeon recording be kept secret. If he fulfilled that, it would compensate for the previous point loss. She handed over an item to pay for everything, an impressive and shining ruby jewel. She was irritated because Kim had looked at her item with a face of disgust. She went to grab another big ruby, but the protagonist said it wasn't necessary. He just praised her for the good work in the dungeon. She found it strange as it seemed like a superior talking to a subordinate. Embarrassed, she just thanked him and left through the portal. Kim was impressed because she performed much better than expected, and he copied her superheating skill. He didn't know exactly what type of magic she used to activate superheating, but since he had the infernal fists, he could use this skill decently. He was excited because this further increased his individual strength, but he was still staring at that red ruby. Because of that, he decided to make a quick stop at the Ruby Tower to look at the item better. Upon exiting the portal, the protagonist checked his submission on the board again. He unlocked a new space for a new feature. That's when he heard a duo talking. They quickly arrived, greeting our boy. Clearly, they were the protagonists from the other side. Shin arrived with some important items for the mission. There were 2 items for the mission that would start that night. The bottom would transform their faces, giving them a common appearance. The protagonist asked if they would have the same face as Shin, but they decided it was time to descend to the deep dungeons. So they started going down a large staircase. Igari asked if they still had to descend much. He couldn't hear the bottom of the place. Kim said that normally they would use the teleportation portal, but since they were sneaking, it was unlikely they would be caught by the guards. After descending quite a bit, they reached door 388. This was the altar of the Serpent Dungeon. It seemed they had arrived without being caught, but they heard voices right behind. They were veterans complaining about the dungeon. They glanced at our little group out of the corner of their eyes. They couldn't identify the group because they were in disguise. Before entering, Shin activated another security system. The item was used as a precaution. Shin could see everything they did from that side as well. The duo entered the portal and saw a large structure ahead. Kim warned to be careful as a shadow was sneaking behind them. The shadow had red eyes and was ready to throw a spear, and indeed it threw the spear directly at the protagonist, who dodged, shaking his head. He identified them as tattooed barbarians, shouting that the sacrifices had arrived. Several came out of the bushes. They continued shouting that the 2 were sacrifices and advanced on the duo. Gori asked if they should follow the plan. The protagonist replied yes, while channeling his magic. A large gust of wind pushed everyone away. Gori drew his sword and executed a technique that eliminated several barbarians. The 2 wished each other good luck and began running. Gori would stay behind to block the enemies. He positioned himself to defend the leader. The plan was to separate so the protagonist could reach the altar faster. The condition to finish the dungeon was to destroy the barbarians or stop the ritual they were performing. Kim knew any route could be taken. There were also secret places in the dungeon. He began approaching the camp, where some were near a fire. The barbarians looked at the protagonist and shouted that the sacrifice was running toward them. They threw their spears in his direction, but the protagonist didn't care about old weapons. He channeled his magic and returned the spears to the attackers. The 2 were hit and eliminated by their own spears. Kim moved toward the largest tent, but an eye appeared there and a golden light magic emerged. The enemy asked if the sacrifice was really that strong. It was the shaman, warning that the sacrifice should stop. Kim began casting the infernal fist against him. To get the dungeon's secret piece, he needed to keep the shaman there, so he started a duel with the shaman, keeping him trapped in place. The golden attack wasn't elemental, and it would be fatal if it hit directly. Kim used superheating to increase the power of the infernal fist. He approached the shaman and channeled wind magic. At the same time, he projected the infernal fist. He punched the shaman, destroying even the golden shield around him, and sent the monster flying into the tent. The power of superheating combined with the infernal fist and wind was much greater than imagined. But a boss is still a boss. Kim told the shaman to focus on defense, but he had to dodge a golden attack that barely passed by. The shaman no longer wanted that boy as a sacrifice and wanted to eliminate him. The big guy got even angrier and attacked with everything. The shaman's desperation was evident, as he couldn't reach the protagonist. Kim hoped his friend had reached the objective. Going toward Gori, he saw that he was surrounded by blood, but it wasn't his, it was from the barbarians he had eliminated. Climbing the staircase, he was surprised by a large barbarian holding a wooden torch. He had to dodge the attack. He wouldn't be crushed. He jumped away from that big barbarian. This was the secondary boss of this place, but Gori was facing what he needed. That was the serpent sword on the altar. According to the guide, he needed to dodge the next attack. Even with the sword in pieces, he managed to block the projectile. It was a poison needle shot by the secondary boss, who had a blowpipe in hand and was standing on the sword. So he dropped the broken sword and conjured a brand new blade from the inventory. The blowpipe barbarian fired again, making Gori dodge countless times. Meanwhile, the big guy behind with a huge log forced the swordsman to duck in fractions of a second. It was really a dirty trick to fight both at the same time. There was no alternative. He had to give everything in this fight. At the right moment, he took a deep breath before being surrounded by attacks. Then he opened his eyes and attacked with everything. Both the blowpipe barbarian and the log barbarian were split in half by the blue sword. Everything ended in a second. It seemed that Gori had an incredible technique, but he couldn't use it all the time. The attack on that big guy wasn't deep enough, so he first needed to grab the golden sword before continuing the fight. The barbarian threw the log at Gori, destroying part of the altar. The barbarian just stared, thinking he had already won, but the log he carried was split in half. The big guy got scared upon seeing this. Gori managed to grab the golden sword and was already emanating mana through it. He stated that it was time to finish this pathetic duel and advanced on the barbarian, who was shouting and roaring. With a deep cut, he passed through the enemy. The barbarian fell, making noise and tremors. On the other side in the village, the protagonist faced the opponent seriously. It was irritating having to dodge the attacks from this guy, but at a given moment the shaman was startled. He said that an aura was near the altar while looking at the tower. A notification indicated that the sword had been collected. The protagonist raised his hand to activate the copy skill. He copied the shaman's priest characteristic. The big guy began shouting that everyone should go to the main altar. The protagonist said he shouldn't get distracted while channeling the infernal fist. This time, he could go all out to defeat the big monster. With a single strike, the dungeon was completed. Gory arrived right behind with the golden sword and asked if that was the main boss of the dungeon. Even the hidden sword item leveled up because of the quick completion. In front of them, several boxes appeared. They were the rewards for completing the dungeon. Gory felt that the golden sword was getting stronger, resonating with his mana. He said he didn't need any reward and gave everything to Kim. The protagonist just said that they needed to leave before everything collapsed. They exited, and Shin praised how fast it had been. Looking back, the portal began to disappear. When a dungeon is completed, it is destroyed and then regenerates. It was necessary to wait to enter again and complete the missions. Here lay the biggest problems. They couldn't erase the dungeon's remnants. Kim warned that someone would check and they needed to leave. They climbed the stairs, and Shin was tired of going up that path again. He asked for back the items he had given, and everyone returned their anonymity items. Shin joked that if they needed him again, they just had to call, but they were surprised by the disciplinary council staff. It seemed they had arrived faster than expected. Shin asked what they were doing so late in that dangerous place. The protagonist seemed to have gotten into trouble. For now, that's all, as the Manhwa episodes have ended. The universe is very mysterious, doesn't it seem non-linear? If you enjoyed the summarized story, comment so I can bring the next part. Don't forget to give that cheeky like and subscribe so you don't miss any continuation. That said, I leave 2 more recommendations on the channel. See you guys, and see you in the next video.